They say fabric remembers. That thread can hold a memory longer than flesh ever could, and somewhere in the folds of a gown pressed beneath glass for 47 years, something was waiting. When they opened the cedar chest that summer morning, the scent was the first thing that hit them, lavender, smoke, and something faintly metallic. Her name was Clara, and she said she only wanted to feel close to her mother again. She didn't know that the past doesn't like to be touched. It bites back. The town of Alder Creek had a way of keeping stories quiet. You could live your whole life there and never hear about the girl who vanished in '58, or the minister who hung himself the day before a wedding that never happened. But those stories were sewn into the seams of that dress. People just stopped asking questions because it made the air feel heavy. Like the ghosts didn't want to be disturbed. Clara found the dress while clearing her father's attic after he passed. It was folded with surgical precision, wrapped in wax paper, still holding the shape of the woman who'd worn it last, her mother, Margaret. Margaret had married in that dress on a May morning in 1958. 2 weeks later, her husband, Thomas, disappeared on the road to the mill. No one ever found him. They said it was an accident. Margaret never remarried. She died at 43, still setting a place for him at the table every night. So when Clara announced she was marrying a man from Chicago and planned to wear her mother's gown, the town smiled politely and said how lovely, how sentimental. But the older folks, those who remembered Margaret, wouldn't meet her eyes. They didn't tell her that the last person who touched that dress before her had gone missing too. They didn't tell her that when the light hit it just right, you could see faint brown stains along the hem. Clara wore it anyway, and by the time the sun went down on her wedding day, the gown had seen its second bride, and its second tragedy. When they found Clara, the candles at the reception were still burning. The music had stopped hours before, but no one had blown them out. Wax had melted in long ivory rivers down the tables, hardening in strange shapes. Guests had scattered after midnight. Some said they felt a sudden chill. Others swore they heard a woman humming in the empty chapel. The sheriff's report called it a disappearance. But people in Alder Creek don't say that word anymore. They say the dress took her. It wasn't superstition. It was repetition. Because Margaret, Clara's mother, had vanished the same way. After her husband's accident, or what they called an accident, she'd been seen walking near the lake in that same white dress. One fisherman swore he saw her standing on the water, reflection and all, her veil trailing behind her like a second body. The next morning they found her shoes on the dock, neatly placed side by side. In 1983 they drained part of that lake for a dam project. What they found at the bottom made even the workers go quiet. 2 wedding bands, both engraved with the same initials. The rings had rusted into one another, fused by time and something far older than love. But no one mentioned that the dress had gone missing from the house just before Clara's engagement was announced. Her father had kept it locked away for decades, claiming Margaret wanted it buried with her. So how did it end up hanging in Clara's hands, smelling faintly of her mother's perfume, despite being sealed in an attic where no one had lived for years? Clara said she found a note pinned to it, written in faded ink. It said only 4 words, "Wear it with faith." She thought it meant faith in love, faith in her future. But faith is a dangerous thing when it's built on someone else's grave. Witnesses at the wedding claimed they saw Clara step outside during the reception, the moonlight catching on the beads of her gown like frozen tears. Some say she was smiling, others that she was crying. But no one saw her come back, just the faint sound of fabric dragging through the grass. 3 days after the wedding, they found the dress. It was hanging from a branch near the edge of Alder Creek, swaying in the morning mist. No body, no footprints, just the gown, clean, too clean, like someone had washed away every trace of what had happened. The local police tried to keep it quiet, but in towns like this, silence is a kind of gossip. Everyone knew. They just didn't say her name out loud anymore. When the coroner received the dress for evidence, he refused to keep it in the morgue overnight, said the air around it felt colder, heavier. His hands would tremble when he touched the lace. He sent it to the county archive instead, sealed in a glass box, labeled property of the Alder Creek Historical Society. But the staff there didn't last long. One by one they resigned. One woman was found staring at the display case after hours, whispering to it. When asked what she was saying, she told them she was trying to remember the vows. If you trace the family line back far enough, you'll find that the gown didn't begin with Margaret. The pattern came from an older dress, stitched by her grandmother in 1919, from a bolt of silk brought over from the coast. It had been torn from another wedding dress belonging to a woman who died before the ceremony ever took place. They said she fell down a flight of stairs, though the coroner's report mentioned no broken bones, only bruises shaped like hands. Each generation took that same fabric, resewed it, reshaped it, wore it again. And each time something was taken, a husband lost, a bride gone missing, a child born still. The silk seemed to hold a hunger, a need to complete something left undone. It wasn't cursed in the way people think of curses. It was more like a promise that couldn't die. In the years after Clara's disappearance, her husband went back to Chicago, sold their home, and never returned. But once, in a letter to his sister, he wrote that he woke up to find a scrap of lace on his pillow, cold to the touch and smelling faintly of smoke. There's a photograph most people haven't seen. It was taken at Clara's wedding, one of those disposable camera shots from the reception table. In it you can see her standing in the doorway of the old Alder Creek chapel, her face turned away, caught mid. Laugh, but look closely. At the mirror behind her, warped and clouded with age. The reflection isn't laughing. It's not even moving. It's just watching her, veil draped low, mouth slightly open, as if whispering something that the photo forgot to capture. When that image was developed, the photographer quit his job. He said he couldn't unsee what was standing just behind her shoulder. When asked to describe it, he said it looked like a hand pressing through the fabric from the inside out. The photo vanished a week later from the police evidence locker. No record remains, only memory. And that's the most dangerous kind of evidence, because memory rots slow. They say the dress is still there, inside the Historical Society's archives. The display case is kept locked now, the lights never turned off. Visitors describe feeling dizzy if they stand too close. A few have said the lace seems to shift, almost breathe, when you're not looking directly at it. The plaque beneath it reads, "Wedding dress, circa 1958. Belonged to the late Margaret and Clara Winslow, local artifact on loan, but the record of that loan, who sent it, who signed for it, doesn't exist. Archivists who have tried to trace its provenance keep running into dead ends. Corrupted files, lost signatures, letters that arrive opened and empty. It's as if the dress refuses to be written about, to be named, and yet there's one undeniable detail that threads all these stories together. The stitching along the neckline, barely visible now, wasn't done by hand. Under magnification, you can see that it's too precise, too deliberate, like something mechanical, inhuman, and woven between the stitches are fragments of hair, human by every analysis ever done, dark brown, aged brittle. Samples match both mother and daughter. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? Would you keep the dress, or burn it and bury what it remembers? The deeper you look, the more the story unravels, and tightens at the same time. In 2004, a graduate student from the University of Oregon came to Alder Creek to write a thesis on folk trauma in rural Americana. She interviewed the few remaining witnesses, combed through courthouse records, and got permission to study the gown itself. Her notes stopped halfway through the project. The last entry read, "The stitching is moving again." 2 weeks later, she was gone. Not vanished like Clara. Her body was found in her motel bathtub. The coroner listed it as suicide, but the details were strange. No sign of struggle, no blood in the water. Just the faint smell of lavender and a white thread wrapped 3 times around her wrist, knotted tight, as if someone had tied it there with ceremony. Her colleagues said she'd become obsessed with the idea that the dress was trying to complete its owner, whatever that meant. After her death, the Historical Society quietly closed its textile wing. The dress was sent to storage in Portland, and the records sealed under the pretext of environmental contamination. But one archivist in an anonymous interview years later claimed that the contamination wasn't mold. It was time, that the silk itself was aging backward. He said it looked newer every year, the fabric tightening, whitening, as though it was being rewoven from the inside out. There's something about Alder Creek that resists forgetting. The church still stands, though no one uses it. People say that if you walk by after dark, you can see a light flickering inside, and the faint silhouette of a woman standing before the altar. The locals won't go near it. They say you can smell lavender in the air, even in winter, and if you stay long enough, you'll start to hear it. The faint sound of a thread being pulled through cloth, again and again, like someone sewing their way back into the world. The county finally paved over the road that led to the Winslow house, but every spring, when the ground softens and the fog rolls low, something white rises up from beneath the soil. Some think it's just wild mushrooms. Others say it's the dress remembering where it was buried. Some stories end. Others fold back on themselves, like fabric turned inside out. In 2021, a new family bought the Winslow property. They didn't know the history. The house had been empty for decades, windows boarded, garden overrun with weeds. The wife, a woman named Lee, said she found a trunk while renovating the attic. Inside were photo negatives, a few dried flowers, and something wrapped carefully in brown paper. Not the dress, but a sleeve, torn, yellowed, with beads dulled by time. It was warm to the touch. Lee sent it to a restoration specialist in Seattle. The technician, before quitting his job the same week, reported something odd. The silk fibers were biologically active, like skin. Microscopic analysis showed human cells embedded in the weave, regenerating slowly, almost imperceptibly. It shouldn't have been possible, but then neither should any of this. Weeks later, Lee started sleepwalking. Her husband found her one night standing in the backyard, barefoot in the frost, whispering names that weren't hers. The next morning, she didn't remember. On her nightstand, he found a length of lace, brand new, white, unaged. He burned it in the sink, but it didn't blacken. It simply curled in on itself, like it was shrinking away from the flame. After that, the family moved out. The house stands empty again, windows dark, attic locked. Locals say they sometimes see a faint white light flickering behind the boards, the shape of a woman moving slowly, as though searching for something she lost. There's a theory now, whispered in the corners of archive rooms and message boards, that no longer exist. They say the dress isn't cursed at all. It's a vessel, an unfinished vow carried down through blood and fabric, mother to daughter, stitch to stitch, a promise so old it forgot what it was promising. Every time someone tries to wear it, to love through it, it remembers a little more. And maybe that's the real horror, that it's not trying to destroy anyone. It's trying to come back, to finish what began generations ago, when a woman in 1919 fell down those stairs and left her wedding unfinished. So, if you ever find a piece of old silk in your attic, faintly scented with lavender and smoke, don't touch it. Don't even breathe near it, because some things in this country were never meant to be unearthed. They were meant to stay buried, with the brides who wore them,